My name is Marieke Sandker. I'm MRV officer and I work for the National Forest Monitoring Team at FAO, and I will be your moderator for today. So some quick housekeeping on the Zoom format of this webinar. You will notice that your microphones are muted, so that is to minimize audio problems, as we're many today. So that doesn't mean we do not want to interact with you. That's actually what this webinar is all about. So please use the chat for introducing yourself, as many people are doing already. And as you have questions going along through the webinar, please use the Q&A. You will see there's a chat box and there's a Q&A box. Please use the Q&A for any questions you might have. And if the question is directed to someone in specific, please let us know. So great, so we can now be closing the poll, and perhaps we could see the results on screen. There we go. So who we have with us today, a lot of government people, wonderful, university research, and many more. That looks wonderful. Then we have a lot of Africa, Asia, Oceania. Okay, it's very late, sorry about that. But you can see the recording. And Latin America, great. All right. And then we almost have a gender balance, a few more male participants. Wonderful. So wonderful to see you all, and wonderful to see all these who we have in our virtual room today. So in this webinar, we will have one presentation, which will be followed by a 30-minute panel discussion with high-level speakers from representatives of the Global Environment Facility, of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, as well as representatives of 4 countries we have with us today: Côte d'Ivoire, Guatemala, Thailand, and Uganda. So you can see on this very nice slide, you can see all speakers that we will have with us today. So after the panel discussion, we will have 20 minutes for question and answers, and that's where we'd really like to hear from you. We will be answering to all questions, but we will not be able to take all questions in speaking. We will try to answer some of the questions also in writing. So in total, this webinar will last for 1.5 hours, and afterwards we will be sharing the recordings with you. So this is a knowledge sharing webinar for the project Building Global Capacity to Increase Transparency in the Forest Sector. So this CBIT-Forest is a 2.5-year project implemented through FAO's Global Forest Resources Assessment and the National Forest Monitoring Teams and its partners. It's financed by the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, or CBIT Trust Fund of the GEF. So CBIT aims to strengthen the capacity of developing countries to collect, analyze, and disseminate forest-related data to make forest data transparent and accessible in line with the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement. So thanks again for joining us and finding some times in your busy schedules today. So what we will do today is first present and discuss the main results and outcomes of the CBIT-Forest project. We will share knowledge and experience from the pilot countries participating in the project, and we will launch the publication towards open and transparent forest data for climate action, experiences and lessons learned. So this session will be in English with simultaneous translation in Spanish and French. So you can switch to the Spanish and French channel by clicking the globe-shaped icon that you should see at the bottom of your Zoom window. Entonces, si quieren escuchar este webinario en español, en la parte inferior de la ventana de Zoom hay un pequeño globo que clicándolo les lleva a un canal para seguir el webinario en forma simultánea en español. Si vous voulez écouter ce webinaire en français, en bas de la fenêtre Zoom, il y a une petite globe. Et donc, si vous cliquez dessus, il vous mènera à un canal pour suivre le webinaire simultanément en français. So with that, I would like to now introduce Christina Pertraki. Christina, thank you for being with us today, who's the leader of the FAO e-learning academy. Christina, over to you.
Thank you, Mareke. Thank you all for joining us and welcome to this webinar. In this webinar, FAO would like, together with our partners, the Global Environment Facility and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, what we would like to do is to share with you all the outcomes of the project on forest data transparency and also our joint experience in the implementation. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that despite all the challenges, also it was during also in the middle of a pandemic. So despite all the challenges, the project was extremely successful, and actually member countries really expressed their satisfaction. But and actually I have to say that the various challenges of the project have actually allowed us to explore to basically explore new ways to innovate in our basically delivery. So as you know, language remains a barrier for learning, and we have done a huge effort to try to design and develop the course on forest transparency, and then adapt it and localize it in 6 languages in a very short time frame. So we have it now, it's available in English, in French, in Spanish, in Arabic, in Chinese, and in Russian. And this was actually, we have done this only for one other course, but to be able to have them in 6 languages, and we also have the course in 6 languages and also in a downloadable format, so that countries with connectivity challenges have the possibility to download the course and do it offline, basically. We have also implemented the digital badge certification system, which is a system that certifies the acquisition of competences. It allows professionals to progress talents within organization and also to increase employment opportunities. And we have done the certification system in 6 languages. And this was also very, very challenging, and it was never done before. We have also created a downloadable package of the entire course content, which is available in printable format, which means that anybody who would like to do and organize a training workshop, a face-to-face intervention, can download the package and just have all the materials ready. We have also designed and developed and also delivered a massive open online course on forest transparency. And this was done simultaneously in 3 languages, with the certification done in 3 languages, and the MOOC was delivered 3 times. And this was also very challenging, and this was also something that we had never done before. So this has also allowed us to innovate in this sense. And as you know, MOOCs are very powerful capacity development intervention. They allow to scale up learning experiences, and they allow skills and competences acquisition, but they are time bound. So in order to share the content of the MOOC and allow countries to adopt the methodology that we have used and also adapt the content to their local context, we have transferred the MOOC in 3 languages and made it available through the FAO e-learning academy. So basically anyone at any time can have access to that. And that also was never done before. So I would like to conclude by thanking our partners, Jeff and UNFCCC, who are also joining us today. I'd like to thank them for their support and collaboration throughout the project, and for giving us the opportunity also of bringing innovation in our learning solutions for the benefit of member countries. Thank you all very much for your time and your attention, and I would like to give back the floor to Marika.
Thank you very much, Christina. That sounds like a great resource, so everybody take advantage of that. Wonderful. Please be reminded again that during this presentations, all the presentations and the panel discussions, do pose your questions in the Q&A, and my colleague Anatoly will be selecting the questions. And also you can help her by indicating who your question is directed to. So our next speaker of today is Julian Fox, who will be making some introductory remarks. So Julian is a team leader of the National Forest Monitoring Team in the Forestry Division in FAO. Thanks, Julian, for being here, and over to you.
Thank you, Marieke, and thank you to everyone for joining today's webinar. It's one of a series organized by the FAO e-Learning Academy. Thank you, Christina, for the excellent collaboration, Agreenium, and the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. I would also like to acknowledge the Jeff and the UNFCCC for the long-lasting collaboration and for joining us on today's panel. Today's webinar will highlight key experiences and lessons learned from implementing the CBIT-Forest project. The CBIT-Forest project has built upon FAO's country experiences and networks to further strengthen forest inventories and forest monitoring, provide better, reliable data, and increase reporting and transparency. And its support for increased transparency in the forestry sector could not be timelier. Starting in 2024, as part of the transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, all countries who have ratified the Paris Agreement will follow a single common transparency process. These reporting requirements outlined in the enhanced transparency framework are universally applicable, thanks to the built-in flexibility that characterizes it. To prepare for the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework, CBIT-Forest has supported developing countries through capacity development, knowledge sharing activities aimed at strengthening the collection, interpretation, and reporting of forest information. Over the last 10 years, FAO has proudly helped more than 50 countries obtain reliable data through the establishment and strengthening of national forest monitoring systems. As described in the Enhanced Transparency Framework, the collection of consistent data provides a solid foundation for reporting forest emissions and removals and for tracking progress on nationally determined contributions. Additionally, national forest monitoring systems can provide countries with the ability to respond to their own forest data needs. And with robust data, countries can inform climate policy and improve the sustainable management of their forest resource. National forest monitoring systems collect forest-related information in two ways: through national forest inventories and through using remote sensing tools. Open Forest, CEPAL, and the Framework for Ecosystem Restoration Monitoring are among the platforms developed by FAO that make the collection, analysis, and reporting of forest data easier and more efficient than ever before. The CBIT-Forest project has been helpful in promoting several of these tools and their importance for increasing forest data transparency. In particular, CBIT-Forest has helped provide forestry technicians with the proper tools and training for data collection and analysis, a crucial step in the development of consistent and reliable monitoring and reporting. The knowledge, material, and workshops developed by CBIT-Forest have provided great opportunities for capacity development and improved regional and international knowledge sharing and networking. Looking back on the project, which finishes this year, CBIT-Forest has conducted many successful events, developed learning materials, and has strengthened forest and climate networks. With lessons learned and insights gained from our pilot countries, which we are very grateful to have us on the panel today, practitioners can continue to help prepare countries for the Enhanced Transparency Framework reporting requirements. Thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your engagement, and we encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. And congratulations, colleagues, on the really successful CBIT-Forest project. Back to you, Marieke.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Julian. Sounds very exciting, all this open source material. Okay, so the next speaker is Rocio Condor. So Rocio is a forestry officer leading the global CBIT-Forest project. She's coordinating activities to make forest data more transparent and accessible in the context of the Enhanced Transparency Framework. Thanks for being with us today, Rocio. Over to you.
Thank you, Marieke and Julian, for your kind words and for reminding us preparations must be made by 2024 to support implementation of the Paris Agreement. I also want to thank our participants and panelists for joining us on this special day as we share experiences and lessons learned. As you will all learn more about the CBIT-Forest project, supported coordinated global, regional, and national efforts to step up developing countries' abilities to collect, analyze, and disseminate forest-related data in line with the transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. These efforts to boost institutional and technical capacities, along with increased knowledge sharing and awareness raising, comprise the main components of CBIT-Forest. Launched globally in 2020, CBIT-Forest has accomplished a great deal in past 2 years. More than 9,000 individuals from around the world benefited from project activities. And these figures refers to the total sum of participation, encompassing everything from pilot country work activities to webinars and virtual training and knowledge sharing activities. Notably, of these 9,000 participants, 38% were women, a promising indicator of women's participation and empowerment in forest monitoring. Similarly, our outreach products garner significant participation, with practitioners and experts accessing CBIT's outreach and dissemination products over 80,000 times. More statistics like this, as well as breakdowns of the numbers, can be found in the project's 2-year in number infographic. Such statistics are what we today call end results, but they are actually building blocks for learning and growth. The publication we are launching today towards open and transparent data for climate action, experiences and lessons learned, highlights experiences and knowledge acquired at the national, regional, and global levels. Open data can help meet global challenges such as poverty, hunger, climate change. I was just saying that open data can help meet global challenges as poverty, hunger, climate change, and inequality. And the project has actually worked with 2 resources for global sharing of forest-related data, upgrading the FAO's Global Forest Resources Assessment Platform, which is now for the first time ever. So as documented in the publication, open data can be catalyst of collaborative climate solution and can help to promote informed policymaking driven by up-to-date data. Since national forest monitoring is largely financed by taxpayers, open data strengthens public trust in forest and climate policy. Open data makes the decision-making process more transparent and public services more efficient and effective. Addressing the concerns of data producers to overcome obstacles to sharing will be fundamental in the coming years. Building the foundations of trust and transparency, data producers can accelerate this release of open data. However, particularly in the forest sector, a lack of initial data hosting infrastructure is often a deterrent. The need for comprehensive legal arrangement will help create well-structured, open, and transparent sharing of forest data. Interestingly, the path of obtaining this insight has not been a straight line. Although presenting its own challenges, the COVID-19 pandemic provides opportunities for us to explore new modalities for carrying out project activities. Adapting as we went, the project shifted from in-person to virtual activities, which broadened our global outreach and enabled us to exceed many of our goals. And as Christina mentioned at the beginning, due to this shift, we were able to deliver 3 editions of a massive open online course, a self-paced e-learning course in 6 languages. 6 country case studies were also launched under the projects, which were effectively used as tools for training and knowledge sharing. And the project also funded the creation of a series of national forest inventory e-learning models. As you know, national forest inventories are key for climate. National forest inventories are key for climate reporting, and now learning about national forest inventory is more accessible than ever before. We have developed a National Forest Monitoring System assessment tool to identify needs and gaps for strengthening forest monitoring to enhance transparency of forest-related climate reporting. And not including to-date international webinars, CBIT-Forest hosted 16 global webinars in 2 years. CBIT-Forest aimed to connect regional forest reporting actors by regions. The publication touches on the project's efforts to facilitate regional dialogues in Central America, Mexico, Southeast Asia, Western and Central Africa, aiming to increase awareness of FAO's Global Forest Resources Assessment reporting process and its linkages to other reporting processes, and to strengthen information exchange between the focal points, mainly the ones for the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The project also supported Latin America and the Caribbean National Forest Inventory Network, and the publication showcase here evidences the advantage of regional networks. 21 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean collaborated to produce for the first time this book on harmonizing the elements of the National Forest Inventory. Regional consistency in data collection and analysis results in reliable and comparable data and improves not only regional, but national and international data reporting. Focusing also on the national level, the publication provides insight into the experiences with pilot countries aiming to enhance their national forest monitoring system. And we will hear from Brazil, Côte d'Ivoire, Guatemala, Honduras, Laos, Thailand, and Uganda. Getting ready to collect and apply all the recommendations and lessons learned gathered during the project's implementation, we will keep enhancing accessibility and usability of global forest-related data, developing institutional and technical capacities, sharing knowledge, and cementing networks, with the optic to contribute to the implementation of the transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. I encourage all of you to take a more in-depth look at this publication and to share it with your networks. And I urge you all to engage others in efforts to increase open and transparent data, particularly women and youth people who represent an untapped vein of potential and who will be vital in building a peaceful and better tomorrow. Thank you very much for your attention.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Rocio, that you managed to deliver this presentation despite the connectivity issues. That's a challenge we're simply facing in this period. Okay, so now it's time for our panel discussion. So we are going to hear from climate and forestry experts from Uganda, Thailand, Côte d'Ivoire, and Guatemala, who are going to share their experience on the actions that have been taken by their countries to improve their reporting over time. We also have the opportunity to discuss with experts from the GEF and the UNFCCC secretariats. So as we go along, I will be introducing each panelist. So the 4 countries we have with us today are, of course, parties to the Paris Agreement, and they have experience under measuring, reporting, and verification, which they are going to share with us. So this will be interesting to hear about the diverse experience in these 4 countries and how forest monitoring contributes and has contributed to the reporting on forest climate action. Thank you very much for being with us today. The panel discussion will take 30 minutes. And again, please go ahead and pop your questions into the Q&A and we'll either respond them in written or live. So first I have one question, which I will ask one by one to all the countries here present with us today. So of course, it's a great thing to have better data on forest, to have more transparency and a better understanding of how forests can contribute to climate actions. But in practical terms, how does your country benefit from the better data? So let me first invite Mr. Bob Kazungu from Uganda to answer this question. So Bob is a senior forest officer working on monitoring and assessment at the Ministry of Water and Environment of Uganda. He is a forest policy specialist and a climate change professional, and he coordinates the National Forest Monitoring System of Uganda. Bob, great to have you. So how does Uganda benefit from the better data? Over to you.
Thank you very much. Just very quickly, first to appreciate our invitation to participate in this webinar. That's very, very important. Very quickly, Uganda successfully completed its RED+ readiness phase, and with all the required elements that include the FREL, the strategy and action plan, the National Forest Monitoring System, and all the other supportive frameworks like the benefit sharing arrangement, the feedback grievance redress mechanisms. So all those are in place. And very interestingly also, Uganda was on a voluntary basis, the first country, through a technical annex to the BUR to submit results for RED+ in April 2020. And we'll recall that during the technical assessment by UNFCCC team of experts, it was appreciated that better data, which means accurate data and data that is showing consistency in the application of methodologies, is fundamental in participating in results-based, for example, but also in increasing confidence, not only in the results, but also in the engagement of partners who are interested in engaging with the country during the results-based payments phase. So working towards better data is key to have confidence to share data, and of course, enhance the transparency requirements for that data, as we see under the ETF of the Paris Agreement. And very importantly, also capacity building of the technical teams in the country is undertaken when we demonstrate the dire need to have better data. So that is how crucial it is for a country to look out for better data for its forestry data. Briefly, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bob. That's fascinating to hear. So data paving the way to results-based payments. That's obviously a good motivation. Right, so let me turn now to my second panelist, which is Mr. Somyot Sangning from Thailand. Mr. Somyot just retired from the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, where he was head of the Forest Inventory and Assessment Division since 2016. He is a forest inventory expert and focal point coordinator of sustainable forest trade in the Lower Mekong Region project. Somya, welcome. So how does Thailand benefit from the better data? Over to you.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And good evening from Thailand for everyone. First of all, I like to introduce my country before. Thailand is at approximately of 51.3 million hectares, and for 32 is a forest. And the majority of Thailand forests are conserved forests. Maybe estimate approximately 64%. And before the submit of less forest reference emission level, Thailand forestry sector was not included nationally determined contribution due to the lack of data now. And after that, Thailand collect data forest for a long time about the focus, but we don't focus in carbon. We focus in biodiversity and stock of wood. But after the Thailand collect forest data from National Forest Inventory, we call Thai form. We have from ITTO to introduce Thai form since 2003. The primary focus of Thai Form is to inform forest stock and biodiversity, and since the first cycle is heavily focused on conserve forest. Forest area is monitored since 1973 for Thailand, when it was estimated at 41%. Forest cover has decreased to 25% in 1998, but before and have been increasing again since. More recently, forest monitoring are improved with remote sensing analysis. By improving in its national forest monitoring system and reporting to UNFCCC, Thailand benefits from a better understanding of how forests contribute to climate action. The latest FIL and FIL submission confirm BUR report that the forest sector has been a sink of carbon at least in 2006. With the new and more accurate data, Thailand is now aiming at adding the forest sector into the NDC in the future and emphasize the role of forest as sink of carbon and thanks to ambitious forest protection policy. With the better data, Thailand can more accurately understand the contribution of forest to Thailand mitigation target. Better and more transparency data also help to formulate policy and measure to reach Thailand objective of 40% forest cover in the future. That's about the benefit from the better data. Your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Somyat. Very interesting. So if I understood correctly, the data you collected actually allowed you to formulate an NDC target. That's wonderful. That shows the importance of collecting all this data.
Yes.
Okay. Great. So let me move over to the next panelist. So we have with us also Mr. Eric Conan from Côte d'Ivoire. So Eric is the head of the MRV unit at REDD+ Permanent Executive Secretariat. Eric is a forest engineer specialized in remote sensing and GIS. Beyond remote sensing, he is a specialist in REDD+, MRV, and greenhouse gas inventory for the forestry and other land uses sector. Now, Eric, how does Côte d'Ivoire benefit from better data? Over to you.
Donc, merci Marieke. Bonjour à tout le monde. Merci à toute l'équipe donc de nous donner l'occasion de prendre la parole sur cette thématique importante. Faut dire que la Côte d'Ivoire, c'est un pays de l'Afrique de l'Ouest qui a connu une forte déforestation historique au cours des 30 dernières années et dont l'économie est principalement basée sur l'agriculture avec pour spéculation principale le cacao. Et poursuivre la production cacaoyère nécessite donc de trouver un très bon compromis entre le secteur forestier et le développement donc du secteur agricole. Et l'amélioration de la transparence et de la qualité des données forestières a énormément contribué à l'action climatique en Côte d'Ivoire, dans la mesure où la disponibilité de nouvelles données robustes, principalement sur les moteurs de la déforestation et de la dégradation des forêts et sur la dynamique forestière, a permis de mettre à la disposition des décideurs des informations concrètes sur les ressources forestières. Et ces informations-là qui sont accessibles à travers un géoportail, donc géoportail du système de surveillance des forêts, qui a été développé pour améliorer la visibilité et l'accès aux données forestières en Côte d'Ivoire, ont servi d'une part pour la production de rapports techniques comme les rapports du niveau de référence pour les forêts dans le cadre de la REDD+ et autres, et d'autre part, et ce qui est l'élément principal, d'élaborer des documents de politique et de stratégie. Donc, au nombre de ces documents politiques, on peut citer la stratégie nationale REDD+, la stratégie de préservation et de réhabilitation et d'extension des forêts et la politique de préservation, de réhabilitation et d'extension des forêts. Il faut dire en plus que la disponibilité de ces données-là a permis au pays d'améliorer son système de suivi des progrès en matière de lutte contre les changements climatiques, notamment à travers son système de MRV. Et cela a permis en effet au pays d'harmoniser les données entre les différents rapports techniques qui sont produits au niveau national, comme la mise en cohérence entre les données du niveau de référence pour les forêts et les inventaires de gaz à effet de serre dans les communications nationales et rapports biennaux actualisés. Et ainsi donc d'avoir des données qui sont comparables entre elles. Merci.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I hope everybody found the interpretation button if you did not speak French, for those who are following the seminar in English. So wonderful. You said data on drivers of deforestation and degradation is being used to formulate strategies and policies. That's wonderful to see that that data is being used. So with that, I'm moving to my fourth panelist of today. And again, if you want interpretation in English, you can click on the globe down. So our fourth panelist is Mr. Martir Gabriel Vasquez Cruz from Guatemala. So Martir is Deputy Manager of the National Institute of Forests in Guatemala. He's a forest engineer by formation, and before taking up his current function as deputy manager, he was director of forest industry and trade and director of sustainable forest management, always with the National Institute of Forest. Martir, can you tell us how Guatemala benefited from better data?
Gracias, muchas gracias por la invitación a nosotros como Guatemala. Es un gusto poder compartir mucho de los beneficios que nos están proveyendo estos datos. Principalmente me voy a enfocar en tres elementos. El primero, los beneficios que nos permiten, la información que ahora disponemos nos permite generar nuevas políticas, mejores, de una mejor manera, estructuradas, así como estrategias que respondan y que ayuden y coadyuven a la mejora de nuestros bosques, a su estructura y distribución, así como también una mayor valoración con datos específicos de la contribución de nuestros bosques pues, en el tema de la fijación de carbono en Guatemala. Por el otro lado, es información bastante útil para la academia. La academia guatemalteca pues, necesita una base por cual empezar y desarrollar insumos y elementos que nos ayuden a generar información e investigación aplicada. Y esa investigación aplicada definitivamente debe tomarse en cuenta para la generación y fomento de las políticas. Por el otro lado, como país también tenemos y contamos con un sistema de información forestal de Guatemala, una plataforma a la cual le denominamos CIFGUA. ¿Y esto por qué lo menciono? Por el tema de transparencia. Los datos generados y que se están generando año con año y que se están midiendo con cada vez más frecuencia dentro del territorio nacional por parte de nuestro personal, también se están haciendo públicos a través de una transparencia que también fomenta la transparencia en cuanto a lo que hacemos y cómo lo hacemos y de toda la información de la cual nosotros contenemos o tenemos como país. Esta plataforma es global, todos la pueden observar, la pueden verificar. Voy a compartir el link acá en el chat para que puedan conocerla y apreciar que ahí está nuestra información, ahí está disponible y creo que ese es uno de los elementos importantes como país. Nos vemos beneficiados también. Toda la sociedad guatemalteca, la academia y otros actores del sector forestal pueden observar los datos, los cuales nosotros los ponemos en total disponibilidad. Eso principalmente resaltaría como los principales beneficios que tenemos como país.
Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing that link in the chat. So transparency to help all stakeholders to access the data for different purposes. That sounds wonderful. Thank you very much. So we're moving on with our panel discussion and let us go back to Uganda. So Bob, you said Uganda is the first African country to submit REDD+ results. And it's also the first tropical country to make available its national forest inventory through FAO's Food and Agriculture Microdata Catalog. Now, can you tell us, was it difficult to achieve consensus on making the data available? And is there already a positive impact for reporting and sharing this data? Bob.
Thank you very much. What a great opportunity to have this kind of conversation. Yes, first to mention that data availability and access is always a huge challenge in many countries, just like it is in Uganda. But we've built upon the work and relationships that we've been having since the time when we did the National Forest Inventory, the latest 2019, and the biomass assessments. So the relationships and that work that we did, plus the lessons we learned there, enabled us actually to know how to access data from different players. And making the data available to the farm catalog, I must confess that it took us some time, yes, but it was not as difficult, because the only thing we needed to do as a country was to agree and take care of what we call the confidentiality elements pertaining to having data shared out there, and to what use is it going to be put. And this kind of aspect ushered us into the urgent need to concretize and initiate the preparation of the data sharing protocol. And this was also part of the CBIT project work that we initiated. And we hope, of course, to have this data sharing protocol completed this year, 2022. And I must confess also that, yes, many partners have provided us feedback to my Ministry of Water and Environment, appreciating especially the partners who are involved in carbon project development, most of whom are civil society organizations and other agencies in the country. And they have actually appreciated our being, among the first countries to share this data freely with the farm catalog, because it's a demonstration that our data is better data, or rather our data has the accuracy and consistency elements taken care of. So to me, I think it is already impacting on how the partners in Uganda, and even the people who want to finance carbon project development partners and others, have looked at Uganda. And I must say that we've received many requests, including our participation in the LEAF Coalition. Some of you could be conversant about the LEAF Coalition and other developments in carbon transactions that are going on across the globe, especially with the post COP26 and conversations about Article 6.2 and Article 6.4 and the others. So we have already impacted on many people with being the first country to share this information. It raises confidence in our data. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bob. We will definitely keep looking at Uganda. And yes, these are issues that are shared in all countries, right? So it's great to learn from one another. So let me pose my second question, moving for this one to Côte d'Ivoire. So Eric, Côte d'Ivoire has been involved in REDD+ for many years now. And as you said just now, it has a very particular context where cacao can both be a driver of deforestation or a climate smart contribution to landscape restoration. So you have an active private sector with some zero deforestation claims, and you participate in the Carbon Fund. You also report to UNFCCC. Now, the question that then arises is it challenging to reconcile the data requirements and needs from these different actors? Eric.
Merci Marie-Ké. Donc, faut dire que la Côte d'Ivoire a adhéré au mécanisme REDD+ depuis 2011 et la phase de préparation au dit mécanisme, elle a démarré en 2014. Donc, comme je le mentionnais précédemment, l'étude sur les moteurs de la déforestation a identifié l'agriculture, notamment le cacao, comme le principal moteur de déforestation en Côte d'Ivoire. Et de ce fait-là, les différentes stratégies en matière de réduction de la déforestation et de réhabilitation des forêts ont identifié l'introduction de l'arbre dans le paysage agricole à travers la pratique de l'agroforesterie comme élément qui permettrait d'améliorer le stock de carbone forestier. À cet effet, il y a plusieurs initiatives qui sont en cours au niveau national et qui intègrent donc la pratique de l'agroforesterie dans leur mise en œuvre. Ce sont l'initiative Cacao et Forêt, par exemple, et des projets donc, qui sont des projets de la phase d'investissement au mécanisme RED+, donc notamment le projet d'investissement forestier et le programme de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre autour du parc de Taï, qui est le plus grand massif forestier en Côte d'Ivoire, qui est également patrimoine mondial de l'UNESCO. Donc, il faut dire que l'amélioration de la transparence des données forestières a permis d'harmoniser toutes les données forestières entre les différents éléments de suivi des progrès et de mise en œuvre des initiatives que j'ai mentionnées précédemment. Et afin de relever le défi de répondre aux exigences qui sont souvent différentes entre les différentes parties prenantes en matière de données, on a mis en place une plateforme qui regroupe l'ensemble de ces parties prenantes-là. Et cette plateforme, elle a permis dans un premier temps de vulgariser auprès des différentes parties prenantes les données qui existent au niveau national et deuxièmement de leur donner accès à ces données-là, donc un libre accès à ces données-là, mais aussi de recenser leurs besoins en matière de données afin de planifier une production avec pour objectif donc de réduire le gaspillage de temps et de ressources qui pourrait être occasionné par la duplicité de la production de données qui existe déjà. Voilà. Merci.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Eric. And yeah, that must be challenging, but great to hear that you managed to harmonize all that data. So my next question will be for Mr. Samya. So Thailand is one of the few countries with multiple forest inventories. And more recently, the country has built its capacities on data analysis. Can you tell us more about how Thailand's experience in data collection and analysis will enhance your national forest monitoring system?
Yes, thank you. For the question, I would like to answer you about for the first one, the Thailand received technical training and data analysis. It's helped both to improve reporting on climate action and for domestic purpose such as boost stock and biodiversity monitoring. For the second one is also help to shift from the original proprietary software. That's what designed for the first inventory cycle to open source solution like to integrate usual forest inventory variable with new variable like carbon. And the third one, the inventory port location is also being revised to include port from both conserve and reserve forest to make result more representative at the national level. And Thailand push more effort to relocate port in order to include forest dynamic in the future forest data analysis. And Thailand is also receive support on remote sensing data analysis for detecting forest change and which FAO level macro region project is working on near real-time forest monitoring. All of this to help monitoring forest trend and improve understanding of carbon dynamic and reporting climate action, while also helping with more traditional use of forest monitoring for wood stock and biodiversity also. That is about this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. Okay, now let's move on to the next question. So the next question is for Guatemala, for Martir. So Guatemala is a multicultural country with at least 23 ethnic groups. Now, you just told us that your country has a wide and strong experience in forest monitoring, and that this data also helps to formulate your national policies related to climate action and forest restoration and conservation. So the question we now have is, how are you integrating local communities in the institutionalization process of forest monitoring in Guatemala?
Gracias nuevamente y bueno, definitivamente tener 23 grupos étnicos distribuidos dentro del territorio nacional es un reto. Es un reto porque no solo son 23 grupos étnicos, sino son 23 idiomas distintos, culturas, formas de ser que están en el territorio nacional. Creo que ha sido una experiencia bastante enriquecedora para nosotros el tener una buena relación y una buena comunicación con nuestros líderes comunitarios y con los diferentes grupos étnicos distribuidos en el territorio, que nos han ayudado a no solo a levantar toda la información que estamos levantando en este segundo inventario forestal nacional que tenemos, que estamos llevando a cabo en conjunto y colaboración con comunitarios, con las comunidades. Y eso es sumamente importante porque ellos se van apropiando de toda esta información y van entendiendo la relevancia del por qué nosotros llegamos a las comunidades y por qué nosotros tomamos esa información de los bosques, de ese recurso. Pero dentro de esta experiencia que hemos vivido de la comunicación e interrelación, hemos generado algunos elementos importantes como un calendario maya del tema de cómo se pueden o cómo se debieran de manejar los bosques en el territorio. Y por otro elemento, quisiera mencionar una anécdota importante y muy enriquecedor que fue para nosotros durante el levantamiento de una de nuestras unidades de muestreos en una de las áreas recónditas.
You're muted.
Okay. En las áreas de aquí de Guatemala, pues tuvimos la experiencia que uno de los compañeros que iba, técnicos levantando la información, tuvo problemas, o sea, en retraso se extraviaron y problemas de hipotermia, una lesión en una pierna, y fueron los comunitarios quienes lo llevaron, lo bajaron desde el punto donde estaba, lo auxiliaron de diferentes maneras, y creo que eso queda marcado y creo que nos ayuda bastante realmente a entender y comprender la relevancia de involucrar a las comunidades desde un inicio de qué es lo que nosotros estamos generando dentro del territorio nacional. Muchas gracias.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Yes, there is so much knowledge in these local communities. It's wonderful that you're managing to take advantage of that. So it's great to hear from these countries some experiences, and also great for countries among each other to hear these experiences. But now we want to pass on to our next panelists. So also with us today is Ms. Namrata Patodia Rastogi from the JEF Secretariat. So Namrata supports the JEF portfolio for the CBIT. She provides technical advice related to CBIT and supports operational and technical aspects related to the CBIT portfolio, working with JEF agencies to ensure delivery of impactful projects with CBIT. So Namrata, first of all, welcome. The CBIT Trust Fund under the Global Environment Facility was created at the request of parties to help strengthen capacities of developing countries to meet the enhanced transparency requirements of the Paris Agreement. Concerning CBIT lessons learned from the AFOLU sector, what are the most common capacity building needs identified in CBIT country projects?
Great, thank you so much, Marieke, and thank you to FAO for inviting me to speak here. It's exciting, and it's been really interesting to hear from previous speakers, especially the country counterparts, and hearing their experiences, especially some of them are the CBIT national projects that I will be touching on in a few minutes. I have a couple of slides which I thought might be helpful to anchor the discussion. And then I will just go quickly into the question that Marieke posed. I thought it would be important for us to just remind ourselves of what the capacity building initiative for transparency, or CBIT, is. As mentioned by Marieke, it was established at the request of parties to strengthen the institutional and technical capacities of developing countries, specifically to meet the Article 13 enhanced transparency requirements of the Paris Agreement. The CBIT has 3 specific objectives. The first is to strengthen national institutions in relation to the transparency related activities. The second is to provide relevant tools, training, and assistance to meet the requirements of the Article 13. And the third is to assist in the improvement of transparency over time. And I think some of the interventions that we've heard before us, as well as from FAO, from Rocio, shows how several of the CBIT projects actually align very well with these objectives. A quick snapshot of the portfolio. Since 2016, we've had about 81 projects in the portfolio. 75 of them are national, and just as I mentioned, Uganda, Guatemala, Côte d'Ivoire, as well as Thailand have CBIT projects. So those are included in those 75 national projects. There are 5 global projects, of which there are 2 FAO global projects, the CBIT-Forest and CBIT-Afalu, which we have been talking about here, and then 1 regional project. There's a total of about $130.8 million in resources allocated. And most of these CBIT projects, I should mention, are about $1.2 to $1.3 million. So they are medium-sized projects in Jeff language. We have good regional diversity. As you can see, we have several projects, over 30 projects from Africa, good representation from the Latin American and Caribbean, as well as Asia and ECA. And I must note here that we have several projects from LDCs and SIDS. And even though this is related to the enhanced transparency framework, which provides LDCs and SIDS with the flexibility provisions, we find a great engagement from these countries in terms of CBIT projects. So I do want to highlight this here. The next point I want to make here, which I will again go into in my next slide, is the Afalu sector. It is a sector that is specifically addressed within the CBIT portfolio, about 37% of our projects. And I do want to mention to our participants here that as Jeff goes into its 8th replenishment period, we will continue to provide support to developing countries for the enhanced transparency framework through CBIT. And to ensure that countries are able to report back through the biennial transparency report, the first of which are due in 2024, which we heard previously from our speakers. The GEF, along with CBIT, also provides support through its enabling activities, the national communications, the biennial update reports, and we've also have a modality now open for biennial transparency reports. So we invite countries, I think several of you are very familiar with these, but I thought it would be important to just highlight this. So now going into the specific question that Marieke posed for me in terms of capacity needs, and I have to say that my job has become a lot easier because several of the countries have talked about these challenges and how they've overcome that and provided sort of their perspectives on these challenges. I am looking at this from a portfolio perspective, so looking at the Afalu projects and those that address Afalu. So there are some projects within the CBIT portfolio that are specifically only for the Afalu sector, some that are broader but address Afalu as well. And as I mentioned before, there are about 37% of projects in the CBIT portfolio that are specifically addressing Afalu. And if you look at LDCs and SIDS specifically, that number goes up to about 41 or 42%. So there's a clear need for building capacities in the transparency sector. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The first challenge that I want to highlight here, and I think this has been mentioned by some of my colleagues, is the need for building robust institutional arrangements and coordination mechanisms. There's a lack of legal frameworks. There's no institutionalizing of transparency, and it tends to happen in a project-based or an ad hoc manner. So there's a lack of MOUs, or there's a lack of focal points or established systems and processes. Specifically for the AFLU sector, we find that coordination is required not only among the sectors, agriculture and forestry, but also at the subsectoral level. And then at the various levels of national, subnational, local, we heard from our Guatemalan counterpart about how you need to engage communities and bring communities together and coordinate amongst them. And I think I want to sort of highlight this point because this is very particular to the AFLU sector, where you do find that because of the rural and the remote nature of this sector, data collection and reporting can be extremely challenging. For some of the higher tier methodologies, you need continuous reporting or a technical sophistication that might not be available in these communities, and capacities need to be built accordingly. The next point I want to make within this is the lack of data availability. There's just not data available. When I look at some of the projects that come through, there's in the previous national communications or the GHG inventories, there's mention of data in the energy sector, but there's no reporting from the AFLU sector. We see that sometimes. Or if data is available, it's extremely weak and not comprehensive enough. Sometimes the data challenge is that it is in hard copy format and the need is to digitize it. There's a lack of data archiving, IT systems, understanding how some of this will be used. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge, and I can't emphasize this enough, and I'm sure my country counterparts will agree with me, is the lack of capacities, the technical capacities. AFLU is a technically complex sector, understanding the concepts and methodologies, the definitions, undertaking country emission factors, uncertainty analysis, using the GIS tools and the georeferencing tools, and some of the tools that FAO has built, which is it was really heartening to hear a comprehensive sort of overview from Rocio on the CBIT-Forest and what it's doing in terms of training, because that's what is needed really. And sometimes it's needed on the ground. Sometimes a virtual format works, and this is just an extremely complex sector, and it's not about just providing a one-time training. The process is continuous and the capacities need to be retained. I think another aspect in the technical capacities is not just from the AFLU sector perspective, but also for countries, practitioners, officials, policymakers to understand what the ETF, what is the enhanced transparency framework, why is it important, how does that connect to the Paris Agreement, and then what are the elements, what are the more ambitious elements. So we see that some countries might have a national forest monitoring system, but is it still not able to meet the ETF requirements that are required. And then the third point, which was really nice for me to hear from several of our country colleagues on how they are using the data already to make decisions. Usually in the CBIT portfolio, we do find that we are building the capacities of countries to enable this, to build, I think one colleague, I can't remember which country it was, just mentioned about developing an open sort of data system or a web portal which would allow data to be publicly for public consumption. I think that's really important, and CBIT projects aim to build that. Right. And three other projects, I'm almost done, Marieke, give me one more minute. And three other points that I want to just mention here is that some of the capacity needs is to build on existing initiatives like RED+. It's important to align to NDCs, and specifically for the AFLU sector, incorporating the gender elements. So that's from my end. Thank you so much, and I appreciate the extra few minutes. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Namrata. So let me go straight to the introduction of our last but not least final panelist, because we're running a little bit over time. So today with us also is Ms. Jenny Wang from the UNFCCC Secretariat. So Jenny is a program officer in the Transparency Framework subprogram of the Mitigation Data and Analysis Program at the UNFCCC. She works on issues related to land use change and forestry, and climate change in the Secretariat, and in particular RED+ and MRV. So Jenny, developing countries are making great progress on an MRV of anthropogenic forest-related emissions and removals. Can you summarize what new reporting requirements are coming at countries when they're moving towards the enhanced transparency framework?
Thank you, Marika. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to colleagues who are following this around the world. Good afternoon to colleagues in Rome. And thank you very much for inviting me and the UNFCCC to be part of this panel as part of the final webinar. But, you know, most of all, after listening to the various panel members, I must say that it's a breath of fresh air to hear the experiences being shared by our colleagues from the various countries on the panel and the exciting things they're doing as they prepare to meet the transparency framework of the Paris Agreement. So it's really great to hear that countries, developing countries, are moving forward. And I think the e-learning module that has been developed by FAO on how the importance of forest data, the importance of transparent forest data will help countries go towards in fulfilling some of the objectives of the enhanced transparency framework. I will not elaborate on what the transparency framework is about. I think that has been said, and only to build on some of the things that our country panelists have mentioned, as well as Namrata. Thank you for summarizing some of the capacity building needs. I can only concur. Those needs are very important. What are the new elements? I think we've heard that the ETF, Enhanced Transparency Framework, builds on the existing reporting and review processes of the convention. But yet, there are a few new elements that countries would have to meet as they report under the Paris Agreement. They will be reporting in the form of a biennial transparency report, and all parties will be making this report called the BTR. And in it, all parties will be providing information and data on their greenhouse gas emissions and removals. And the other thing that they need to report on is on how they are tracking progress in implementing and achieving their NDCs, their National Determined Contribution. They would have also to cover other information and data that would be related to climate change impacts and adaptation, and what are the information that relate to their financial technology capacity building needs, in particularly for developing countries, and the support that developed countries are providing. So as you know, that in Glasgow at COP26 last year, that the COP finalized the provisions, the guidance for operationalizing these modalities that were agreed that guides the reporting under the ETF of the Paris Agreement. We know what is the benefit of the need for transparency in data and information, particularly for the forest sector. We've already heard some of the examples provided by our colleagues that, it helps in Côte d'Ivoire, it helps them identify drivers of deforestation when you would have transparent data that would go into part of your developing your national strategy, and the need for data platforms in managing such data. It not only leads to transparency, but I think it is also being transparent to all stakeholders who are involved. And part of good communication, I think Guatemala summarized it very well on how they are getting their stakeholders involved. So these are some of the benefits that transparent data and information, which includes the forest sector, leads to better national planning, helping countries develop their plans and strategies, in particular in how they would meet their nationally determined contribution. And such transparent data and information will also help countries identify what their capacity building needs are and facilitate them on assessing support for these capacity building needs. So in short, I would say transparent data would help meet help countries to meet their commitments to on what they identified for the NDCs, and it also helps build confidence and trust among countries of their climate actions by having transparent data and information, which we also heard that it's important to have a system where such data and information will be managed and coordinated and being accessible by all the relevant stakeholders in the country. On the capacity building needs, I think Namrata summarized it very well. There was a CGE study done about 2-3 years back, and the elements that were identified for CBIT projects, I think it was also identified by the CGE in their study of capacity building needs, which apply to the AFALU or RED+ sectors. So I guess in a way that sort of summarizes what I would like to say in answering in terms of the new elements that countries have to report and robust institutional arrangement. It may not be new, but you would definitely need that. And I think we've heard those examples by our panelists, and Namrata has also emphasized on that fact, that the very importance of robust institutional arrangement. And so I can only end by saying, you know, is for countries to start now and take action already now to ensure that you would be ready when the time comes for reporting under the Paris Agreement, under the ETF, and preparing for your biennial transparency report. Thank you, Marika.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jenny. So unfortunately, we've run a little bit over with time, so the Q&A, the live Q&A will be somewhat shorter, but as you can see, a lot of questions have already been answered in written. So we will answer all the questions in written that will become online later. So even if we don't manage right now, an answer will be coming. So let me just try and pick one question. I saw there were many questions for Guatemala, which Martir already answered in written. I have a question here for Uganda. So Bob, the question here is, what kind of institutional arrangements did FAO put in place in Uganda to promote the data dissemination? It's a question from Cleto.
Thank you very much. It's a great question indeed, I must say. Uganda went through a very rigorous process to, implement a project that we named institutionalization of the National Forest Monitoring System. The name of that project tells it all, what is contained in that report. And in that report, we identified the institutions that are relevant for data, both collection, analysis, and all the other technical aspects related to data, and also coordination functions for data management in the country. And the institutions I could just mention very quickly here include the Ministry of Water and Environment, which is doing the coordination function, the National Forest Authority, which is doing most of the technical elements, data collection analysis, the Climate Change Department, which has a function to report to the UNFCCC for the GHGI, and you know very well that the AFALU contributes to the GHGI, reporting. We have the local governments. These are the concentrated or decongested structures across the country. They are administrative structures across the country. They also participate in data collection. We have the private sector, which provides information. We have a robust private sector in the country, which has undertaken commercial tree growing. And we have, it provides data to the system. And all these institutions have been brought on the same table to have a conversation on how do we initiate a data sharing protocol. And we still have some work to do to complete that data sharing protocol. So we have institutionalized the National Forest Monitoring System and its functionality. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
And maybe to mention, the report is available. I asked Leto for his email address so that I can, I can share that report immediately. I'm just waiting. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm sure we will make that connection. Okay, wonderful. There are so many other questions. It's really hard to select them. So yeah, I see Benin also interested in learning from Côte d'Ivoire. Wonderful. Let me see if I can take another question here. Maybe I would pose one live to Guatemala, as they had a lot of questions. So I have here a question which is actually to all countries, from Pedro Montero. Apart from the opportunities and tools, could any of the panelists elaborate on eventual overarching challenges identified during the process in different countries? Martir, do you want to respond to that question?
Claro, ¿me podrías repetir la pregunta, disculpa?
Yes. Apart from the opportunities and tools, could any of the panelists elaborate on eventual overarching challenges identified during the process in different countries?
Gracias. Yo creo que parte de los desafíos generales es el tema de la adopción de la tecnología que hoy por hoy tenemos disponible. Hay mucha tecnología disponible, pero para el sector forestal todavía somos un tanto incipientes en cómo la estamos adoptando. ¿La estamos tratando de adoptar? Sí. Pero creo que ese es uno de los retos muy marcados. Por el otro lado, está una mayor y mejor participación, no solo de las comunidades, sino también de las mujeres dentro del sector forestal. Creo que son elementos sumamente importantes. Nosotros contamos con una estrategia de género que busca la participación, no solo dentro de nuestra institución, sino entre todos los servicios que como Instituto Nacional de Bosques fomentamos. Siempre tratamos de resaltar la importancia y valoramos el trabajo tanto en MIPYMES como en los programas de incentivos forestales, el tema de la participación de la mujer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Martir. Okay, so with that, I think we need to move on in our schedule, and we will continue again going in writing with the question, but we also do not want to miss our last speaker, of course. So with us today is also Mr. Anssi Pekkarinen, who will give us a few closing remarks. So Anssi is a team leader of the Global Forest Resources Assessment Team. Thank you for being with us, Anssi, and over to you.
Thank you, Marike. And dear colleagues, let me start by thanking you all for been here with us today and for the rich discussion that we have had. A special thanks, of course, go to our speakers who have shared their insights on the ongoing efforts and future needs to improve the transparency of forest-related data and information to meet the requirements of the Paris Agreement. But let me just try to summarize the session we just had. We started the technical program with Rosia's overview of the novel learning resources and activities developed during the CBIT-Forest project. Let me just remind you that these materials will continue to be available online for the foreseeable future. We hope that you will find them useful and can help us to share them through your own professional networks. After Rosia, we have heard from our colleagues from countries how the CBIT pilot have worked to increase the transparency of national forest data. In Uganda, transparency has been increased by sharing data across several forums, and that has paved the road for results-based payments. Uganda has also made excellent progress by sharing their NFI data through the FAO microdata catalog. Thailand has improved the statistical analysis and quality of the data and statistics, including using remote sensing to better inform the formulation of the NDCs and achieving the national policy objectives. In Côte d'Ivoire, the better data has provided accessible and concrete information on forest resources and their changes, including on drivers of deforestation. The build system also supports development of policy and strategy documents, and great progress has been made in improving the transparency of forest data, harmonizing them, and reconciling the data requirements and needs from different actors. Also in Guatemala, progress has been made in producing and sharing better data, which are now becoming accessible also to the general public. Good progress has also been made in gathering information from different parts of the country through collaboration and involvement of the 23, if I recall right, local communities in forest monitoring process. Many thanks to Mr. Kazungu, Mr. Sain-Jin, Mr. Conan, and Mr. Vasquez for having shared these insights with us today. In addition to these encouraging country examples, we have also learned from Ms. Namrata Patogia-Rastochi about the CHEF's impressive CBIT portfolio and specific capacity building needs in the technically complex agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector. Lack of data, technical capacity, and coordination clearly remain issues that we need to continue to address. And finally, we enjoyed the insights of Ms. Jenny Wong from the UNFCCC on the new reporting requirements for countries moving to enhanced transparency framework under the Paris Agreement. We also heard how transparent data helps countries to meet their NDCs and leads to better identification of capacity building needs and assessing the support needed. Many thanks, Namrata and Jenny, for having shared your valuable knowledge and experiences on these matters. At the FAO, we stand ready to apply the recommendations and lessons learned from this project to further contribute to the improvement of forest data transparency and sustainability at both national and global levels. As my colleague Julian Fox said earlier, during the past years, we have strengthened our support to national forest monitoring efforts around the world. The resulting national forest monitoring systems and the data they produce are the cornerstones of reliable, credible, and transparent reporting for national and international reporting needs. We will also continue our work on improving the quality, accessibility, and transparency of the global data on forest resources, as we are now moving towards the next Global Forest Resources Assessment, FRA 2025, as we call it. At this very moment, we are preparing a proposal for the scope of the next assessment. And while continuing our efforts to further reduce the reporting burden, we are also working on a more flexible reporting process. That will allow more frequent voluntary updates of key forest-related indicators as a response to the evolving information needs of the international policy arena, the Paris Agreement, the Sustainable Development Goals, and forthcoming post-2020 biodiversity framework, among others. We are also planning to further strengthen our collaboration with other forest-related reporting processes to ensure better alignment and information exchange among the national focal points. And finally, we will continue the work on the open access online Global Forest Resources Assessment platform to facilitate the country reporting process and to make it easier for the FRA national correspondents to visualize and use different sources of information. This will help to better understand inconsistencies in different datasets, explaining those differences in an explicit way, and harmonizing the data reported to different processes and conventions. Colleagues, before closing, I would like to use this opportunity to thank Rocio and our colleagues at the FAO e-Learning Academy for having organized the event, Marieke for the excellent moderation, and the Global Environment Facility for the financial support that helped us to implement all these presented activities. I hope today's discussions have inspired us all to take further steps towards transparent production and dissemination of forest-related data. Climate change is a real threat to human well-being and the health of the planet. And halting deforestation and reducing forest and land degradation are among the best nature-based solutions to the climate crisis. With better and transparent data on forests, we can make better decisions that will help us to conserve and use our forests in a way that secures a sustainable future for us and for the planet. Thank you all. Stay safe and have a great rest of the day.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Anssi, for those wonderful closing remarks. Maybe just as a very last, every panelist can turn on their camera and we can make a little photo of all panelists together. And thank you everybody again for joining today from your different time zones. And the recordings will be made available, and also the questions will be answered and will be published online as well. Thank you very much. Do we have everybody? Okay, I hope our technical colleagues managed to take a photo.
Colleague from meeting service, can you please put us in gallery view so that we can take a picture? Thank you. Okay, I took a screenshot.
Great.
Please.
Okay, wonderful. Many thanks and have a wonderful day, everybody.